All right, that's a brand new countdown timer that I just found, which doesn't have any audio, so it was all silent, which I think we're going to compensate for in this edition of the Teflon Tales. With me, I have a longtime friend and cohort from the amazing recognized experts group of Dory Clark, Robbie Samuels. Welcome, Robbie.
Thank you so much for having me here. This is great.
So let's start with something that I think defines you today, which is hashtag no more bad Zoom. Right? And you look at that, and everybody's attention is on it because no one wants a bad Zoom, and people live and breathe Zoom all day long, right?
Hmm.
But even if you were to roll back the clock, let's say 12 months ago, that wasn't who you were. So talk a little bit about, and then we can get into the Teflon tales. Talk a little bit about what happened at the time the pandemic hit, what you were doing, and then how did you pivot to where you are today?
Great. Yeah. So, March 9th, I had this sense that the world was changing. And by March 11th, I knew that what I had been known for, which was networking skills, wouldn't really be the currency of the day, wouldn't be very valued. I had spent over a decade building up my credibility, my expertise as a networking expert. I had spoken for over a decade on this topic, art of the schmooze, strategic, effective, and inclusive networking at conferences. I wrote a book on the topic. I did a TEDx on the topic. So, I work with all these different organizations to help them design more engaging events. I was teaching people how to network at those events. And then March 11th, there are no events. So I'm not, it's funny, my reaction wasn't like, woe is me, like, what do I do with my business? It was, how do I show up and add value? And, if what I was known for was eye contact and business cards, shaking hands and body language, that's not what we need to be talking about right now. So March 12th, I wrote 9 ways to network in a pandemic, and I shared it with my social media community, and then eventually as an email as well. And that got some good response. And one of the things I had shared was to do a virtual happy hour. So I
Mhm.
decided that I would try that. And in fact, I posted in Dory's group Thursday the 12th at like 8 o'clock at night, hey, if I host something tomorrow at 5, who would come? And a bunch of people replied. And I didn't post it anywhere else. And I was like, I guess I'm doing this. So at 2 in the afternoon the next day, I thought I should probably tell more people. And I then I shared it all over the internet as much as I could. And 20 people came to that first one. Um, Several fellow Rexers from Dory's community. And I have been hosting a weekly virtual happy hour, now called the No More Bad Zoom virtual happy hour, every Friday since then. And it really is the start of a brand new business that I created this past year.
So Ravi, so that week, right? And you have this clearly embedded in your mind. I can see, right? Because a lot
Mhm.
happened during that week, both internally and externally. But talking about Teflon and the whole Teflon tales, which is really about how do you get hot really quickly, but how do you cool down on
Mhm.
things that are not working, cool down to kind of make sure you have work-life balance. But what you did over there, I think, begs a little bit of digging into, right? Because it it evolved into wanting having to kind of quell your inner critic, having to take a bitter pill to swallow, saying, "Hey, your current business may be going down very fast," but at the same time, going out to Dory's group and saying you're going to do this, making making yourself accountable to actually deliver that, and then going broader. I mean, how did that all happen in that space of a week, where people take years wanting to pivot but not able to?
Well, part is that I didn't think of myself as pivoting. I really was trying to show up and offer value. How can I be of service? Listen, I remember what it feels like to feel stuck. I was very stuck with, like, I don't know what to do next. How, what do I do? How can I show up? Now, when I go back and look at a calendar, it was 2.5 days. but but I do know that feeling.
Mm.
But once I had a plan to write the 9 ways to network in a pandemic, and then on Friday the 13th of 2020 to host a virtual happy hour, I then had a thing to do. So I think that it just made me feel better knowing there were action steps laid out. like, oh yeah, I can write something about network. Like networking to me is not something we only do in person.
Yeah.
I'm very comfortable networking online. Like let me write something. And in fact, I wrote it in the context of events closing and or canceling or being postponed or going online. So it's sort of like, hey, if I would normally see a person at a conference and the conference doesn't happen, shouldn't I still reach out to that person? Like it was that kind of advice, or reaching out to speakers that would have been presenting, thanking organizers for all their efforts. Like it was really contextual advice for that particular moment because we didn't know what this was going to be. All I knew was that in the immediate there were no in-person events. And our school, said we'll be out of school for our kids for 2 weeks. My wife and I looked at each other and we were like, no way is this going to be 2 weeks. So I also think, to answer your question, I was not thinking this is a blip. This is a short term, I can ignore it moment. I saw this, I couldn't have foreseen the extent of this, but I saw this as being a disruption that required some actual attention and energy on my part.
Okay, so again, you touched upon something which I think people find incredibly hard to come to terms with, right? Which is you become successful at something, right? I mean, Teflon has helped you. You've become hot. You become really good at it, right? And then something happens, right? In this case, completely outside of most of our control, and people usually hold on to something where they're quote unquote successful, right? And you were able to kind of let go of that, almost start anew, and having that recognition. So what advice do you have for folks who are in that? I mean, we just talked about somebody that you just met, right? Whether it's an event organizer, whether it's somebody running a restaurant, it's like things getting away from your past success,
Mhm.
starting from ground zero, and how does that transition happen?
Well, I think it was important for me to think of the essence of the work that I had been doing and to recognize that it wasn't about in-person events.
Mhm.
So I have a belief that events are about content and connection. And that's the reason that we made the effort to get on planes or travel or drive and go to a destination and, you know, end up there at the conference, make all those plans. It wasn't just to get information and knowledge, but it was for the possibility of meeting great people.
Yeah.
Now, at that time, pre-pandemic, virtual events were kind of like bonus content. We didn't expect a lot of them and they didn't deliver a lot beyond content. How many times we sat through 45 minutes of death by PowerPoint, followed by ineffectual Q&A and no one moderating chat.
Yeah.
So what I recognized was that if I have this belief that events are about content and connection, then virtual events are no exception. So it didn't really, in the beginning, it didn't feel like a big pivot. It didn't feel like I was like, it felt like same message, different medium. And I think that actually helped me move forward without worrying about it being a new business or a new brand or anything like that, because I was taking the recognized expertise that I had and then just showing up in this new space saying, okay, well, if you cared about making sure that your participants actually met each other, and there's these studies that 76% of people surveyed, this is the International Association of Exhibitions and Events, found that 76% of people surveyed said that networking was a top driver for why they chose to attend an event. And if that's true, and I think we all instinctually go, yeah, that makes sense. But then you think about your own behavior at those events and of
Yeah.
those around you and think, it's not like 3/4 of the people are following through on those intentions. And what is the thing people always say they want more of from conference organizers? Networking time. So I'm like, well, clearly we now have to find a way to meet that need, online. Now, did I have the answer? No. And in a lot of ways, these Friday events were a great place for me to experiment. My
Yeah.
first time opening up breakout rooms was Friday, March 20th, the second one I ever did. And the and I know this because prior to the pandemic, even though I'd used Zoom for 5 years, I had never done it outside of a just like this, like an interview style.
Mhm.
I host a podcast. I went from Skype to Zoom because there's no login information and My guests could never remember their Skype login, so I switched to Zoom. I didn't give it a lot more thought than that. So I think like to go from, realizing, oh wow, I didn't have this setting enabled. I didn't even know I had this. And then April 14th, I started collecting registrations for my weekly event. About 1,200 people have signed up since April 14th. And in mid-April is when I announced that I was piloting a 4-week program in May, and 14 people signed up like within 10 days, and it started. And then I ran it for 4 months, 4 weeks at a time, over 4 months. I ran it 4 times, and it became a certification program. So the 5% Advantage program, people go through the 4 weeks and then they get certified by submitting a video. So they have to actually show they know what they're doing. It's not just show up and get it. And they become a certified virtual event professional. And, depending on who you are, like that's some credentialing that can really help you as a speaker. But I'm also using it to help find Zoom producers because I now need Zoom producers to subcontract to. And so it's been really great. I have 3 people that I trained earlier on. And now my next cohort, there are more people coming in because they want to join my, growing global team. I mean, and I now have all these I really work with national and statewide advocacy organizations, helping them strategically bring their events online. And I think that's the other thing you have to figure out when you're shifting into a new line of work is, again, it's important to pick a lane or niche or however you want to describe it. Just because I know how to do Zoom doesn't mean I want to do any kind of Zoom party. And there are people who showed up and now they're running memorial services and funerals. Some are doing weddings, others are doing birthday parties, right? So that's not the stuff I do. So it's good to know what you want to do and who you want to do it with. I'm a mission driven person with a background in nonprofit and advocacy work. So it kind of made sense, but my network, that was my network. So it kind of worked out in that way. I think I'm answering your question and going way past it, but go
No,
for
no,
it.
I think this is useful because you mentioned certain things that are sometimes lost, right, in the noise, which is mission. So you knew what you wanted, and then you said content and I mean connection and communication, which is really ultimately what you were giving to your clients and end users. And now just so happened that hey, instead of going highway X, you're going highway Y, and you just have to learn the rules of the road. But one
Yeah.
of the other things that you do consistently, right, which is constantly put out these short videos on LinkedIn, right? And we talked about breakout rooms. I was watching another one yesterday about how you can highlight people around. And so for me, this is the giving back piece of it. Because for me, as I was doing your social background, it was like Robbie is putting so much time trying to keep up with these Zoom features. So I don't have to. And then he's putting it out there. So talk a little bit about that giving aspect of it, which is really about, I mean, it obviously builds your social proof, but it also builds a community of people who kind of automatically look to you, and then some percent of a percentage of them will come to you if and when they have a business, right? But sometimes people get lost in, okay, should I share, when should I share, how should I share? But you're doing it consistently.
In mid-April, I decided that this was a thing. I really enjoyed doing these virtual happy hours. I also had a chance to host a virtual happy hour for our mutual friend Marie in Contrara. She had a virtual summit, and I was talking to her about her summit. And I was saying, like, and everybody started doing summits when the pandemic hit. That was another way people started showing up and offering value. And I said, you know, the way to really provide value is to create some kind of live component where people can interact with each other about the content, otherwise known as virtual happy hour, I guess. So I hosted that for her. And she also came to my first ever virtual happy hour. So I think could visualize what I meant. And I just left that. I was like, I love it. And then I had an opportunity to be the online MC, the virtual MC for an event for a company that I was working for. And I was like, wow, like that was a lot of fun. Totally. And I totally love that. So when I was like, okay, I want to do this. I went on domain.com and tried to figure out what domains to buy. Because that's how entrepreneurs think, right? So why we all have so many domains.
Yeah.
And when I I tried a bunch of them and I own really random ones, but I came across No More Bad Zoom because at the event with Marie and Contrara, I was, talking and saying a bunch of stuff. And I said something and someone said, "Ah, bad Zoom." And I was like, "Yeah, Zoom's like a 4-letter word." And next thing you know, I was like, "We don't want any more bad Zoom." And it just stuck. So once I had that, I had to rebrand because it was really important that my network know what I now want to be known for, right? It's not just who you know and what you know, it's who knows what you know.
Right.
And so I need to make sure the people who already know, like, and trust me understand that I can provide something of value now. Like, yes, you knew me before doing something else, but here I have to bridge it for them in a way that makes sense. I can't be like, oh, by the way, I'm a plumber. Like, I don't think they would make, they'd be like, where did that come from? So I had to make the transition like seem smooth. And so that again was the, hey, events are about content and connection, virtual events are no exception. And I just kept repeating that's my mantra. So at first, the content I was putting out was to make sure that people understood what I was about. I didn't put out steady content until the fall.
Mhm.
But for the first 6 months, I changed, like, I mean, listen, I've had the same website for 5 years. I figured out how to create a new homepage myself. I'm working on a new website right now. Can't wait. It'll be out next month. But I mean, I sold my first 20 spots into my 4-week program without there being a single mention on my website about the program, right? Because I wasn't selling to strangers, I was selling to people I knew. And the reason I was able to sell to people I knew is because I was telling the people I knew what I was doing. And so by September, it was I want to be seen as the authority in this space. And so I started to create a very committed content calendar. And so the way it's now, at first it was 3 times a week I was making Zoom videos. Now it's twice a week, Thursdays and Fridays. A Zoom video comes out. Monday I do a Forbes article, usually on Zoom, and sometimes it could be like Inc. or Fast Company or something. Tuesday my weekly email comes out, so I create a video of me basically performing it, and then Wednesday is the links for my weekly podcast. So now I've got that steady rhythm, and I have an amazing virtual assistant and a company that's kind of been guiding me in my LinkedIn out, articles and creation and such. But once you commit to like content, now I've got it all created now through the middle of February. So I'm not stressing myself out about it last minute. And the really cool thing is all that content, now that I have a new cohort for my 5% Advantage program, I put some of that content in an organized fashion on a learning management system that they have access to before the first session with me. And so I can be like, hey, before we meet, like, here's how you get started. You want to watch these 10 videos. So it's going to actually really improve the experience of that cohort because I wanted to spend the first 2 hours on the first session just like filling them up as an empty vessel. They'll have already interacted with the content, and then they'll be able to interact with me and talk about it and ask questions. So I think it's multifold. I want to be a value. I also really love my weekly event because I do an hour of Q&A at the end, and most people who have questions are not urgent about their questions, so they'll wait until Friday. And so I'm not being, bombarded with, I mean, that's what was happening. People were just like emailing me, PMing me, like, help, help, help. So the more video content I put out, they can find their own, and then they can always ask me questions live at my weekly event. So in some ways, it was self-preservation, I guess, because you can't make a living if you're busy having coffee chats with everyone.
Yeah, I just want to call out George. George, yeah, thanks for being here. Second week in succession, joining the show. Thanks.
Hey, George.
Um, and so you actually jumped the gun. I was going to ask you that last question, but I'm going to push again, which is you have pivoted or you have adapted through your journey, right? Like what you're talking about, if you're having this consistency, getting a virtual assistant, building a cohort, using the material that you've created as pre material before somebody joins that. And that's something that I think for a lot of people, especially entrepreneurs, right, which is you end up burning both ends of the candle, and then you feel burnt out and you have Zoom fatigue and everything else that goes on, right? So talk about that discipline that or what I mean, you clearly mentioned that you put milestones along the way and you measured yourself against that. What other tips do you have for the viewers in terms of, as they're trying to do many things, how do you balance stuff out, and especially how do you cool certain things off? What did you have to turn off in order to move forward?
Well, I did have to let go of something that I really enjoyed. In December of 2019, or November maybe, I started working at yeah, I think it was November, at Danny Inney's company called Miracy, and I was coaching entrepreneurs. So I had some private coaching clients in 2019, 2020, but then I had a dozen of their students, entrepreneurs that I was working with and meeting with every week. And then in May of last year, I also got invited by them to take on overseeing a cohort, excuse me, of about 100 students who were taking a class about online classes. Now, those two things combined were more than full time. I mean, that was plenty of work. A lot of hours built into like just meeting with people and all that. So I didn't know in May when I said yes to the second assignment that, by July, my business was going to be taking off and I would have clients, like organizations hiring me and doing pre meetings and meeting with prospects. So I had this 4-month commitment. I had to kind of hold on through it. It was a very boot camp experience. I learned a ton. I loved it. Loved the people I was working with. And I thought, okay, at the end of September into October, it'll quiet down. I'll go back to just the coaching plus the business. Again, I love coaching. I wasn't ready to give that up, but it didn't quiet down. And then in November, I took a week off, quote unquote. But in reality, all it meant was I stopped doing anything related to the company, the Miracy company, and I still had lots to do for my business that week. And I worked, I had 2 mornings off and I only worked, I think, one night. And it felt like, oh, this is reasonable. Like,
Mm, mm,
so I actually gave my notice on Tuesday of the week that I had off because I realized within 2 days that what I was trying to do was like wasn't going to be reasonable. And then I was stayed on for another month or so to wrap things up neatly. And now it's so great because like yesterday I got on a call with a client at 10:30, do a 2-hour tech check.
mm,
We were on for 6 hours. And then we came back again today and spent nearly three. Actually, we spent 3 hours doing a tech check today that was supposed to only be an hour.
mm.
So I'm just grateful that like I have some flexibility now in my schedule. So I think, at some point you do have to cool things down and make really hard choices, even though you might enjoy something to pursue something else. And in the in between moments, you just got to focus on getting sleep, and getting exercise, and drinking water, and like, eating well and doing the best you can. And I have the most amazingly supportive spouse, and she bore the brunt of our family, going on for many months there. But now I'm back to designing a schedule again, and blocking time out. And I actually hired a process and systems coach, Mary Williams. Shout out to Sensible Woo is her company, and we started meeting in, I guess, November, because I knew I needed to create what would the new normal look like. I was actually working with her at a time when I decided, she was one of the people I talked to. I was like, I can't continue doing this. And she was like, I can't find more time for you by just making you more efficient. You're not that inefficient. I was like, okay, I guess it was helpful. It was helpful to get outside counsel. I think that's one of the things I'd recommend is like go to trusted sources like peers and or mentors or accountability partners or your peer mastermind, people who get you. I mean, like I'm hardworking and I'm not that disorganized. And she was like, you can't find the time by just becoming more efficient. So
Right.
I think that helped me decide to let go of that. Um, and now I'm all about trying to adult my business. Like it's been it's been kind of funny, but like that's my goal for these 12 weeks is a lot of things about maturing a business that grew so quickly and wanting to make sure that I'm building a strong foundation. Because at first, talk about Teflon, it's just like you try things and you don't get too attached, and you try things, you don't get too attached. Well, that thing worked. Well, that thing worked. Like, but now I feel like, okay, we're about to hit a year. It's time for me to make sure that I, a new website, all different things that I'm working on. So yeah,
Wow. I mean, you are living the Teflon life, man. You just covered everything under the sun.
now I know.
Uh, I know it's late for you again. Thank you for taking the time, and hopefully the listeners get value out of it. And Again, hashtag no more bad Zoom. You can't go wrong with Robbie, and please
Yeah, they
follow
can.
him.
I would love them to join me anytime, every Friday at 5 o'clock Eastern. You go to nomorebadzoom.com. It's free, and I do some Zoom like how tos, and we do a lot of networking. We have 50 or 60 people come every week, and 20% have been there 20 or more times, and 50% have been there 8 or more times.
Wow.
So yeah, we always have 25, 30% new. So there's always been new folks, but they're very warm and friendly. And it's just a great place to network. And then that last hour, I do lots of Q&A on anything related to Zoom. So yeah, please come join us. Nomorabadzoom.com.
You're the Zoom master, man. Again, Robbie, thanks for your time and thanks for joining me. Thanks.